Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the continued public hearing of the Milton Zoning Board of Appeals in connection with the application under 40B with respect to 648 to 652 Canton Avenue in Milton. When we ended the last session of the public hearing, it was my understanding that there would be some further meeting consultation between peer review experts as well as experts on behalf of the applicant, and we were going to hear the sort of the upshot of those meetings, and that would be the first order of business tonight. So with that preface, I'll turn it over to whoever, Jesse or whoever wants to take the lead.
Or good evening, Chairman Hurley. I can start off tonight. And thank you for the introduction, and good evening to you and to the members and members of the public. For the record, my name is Jesse Schomer, attorney for the applicant on this project. To update the board members, we did have a follow-up working session with the peer review consultants, and that was Cliff Bomer of Davis Square Architects and Sean Reardon of Tetra Tech, and that was on Friday morning of last week. The meeting, I would say, went very well, and there was a number of issues that we discussed, but the general consensus from both Mr. Bomer and Mr. Reardon, and I don't know if they're here tonight, we had discussed with them during the working session, having them attend tonight to be able to speak to the members themselves. But the impression, generally speaking, was overwhelmingly favorable in terms of the redesign that we've made and the site changes, the connection of the dead end driveway locations. There were some discussion at the working group session of some additional changes, such as additional green space around the consolidated building 6 that we showed the board members at the last meeting, and perhaps relocating some of the parking in order to accommodate that change. But generally speaking, I would say the meeting went very well. And I believe our team members are on tonight. They can answer any further questions. But what we would propose before we get into questions from the members and perhaps from the public as well, based on the feedback from the peer reviewers, we feel that the direction that we've received from them is that the plan that we presented at the last hearing is the definitive way forward, and that this is, I would say, on the 2-yard line in terms of what they consider to be an approvable plan for most respects. There is still the need, Mr. Reardon did discuss that there's a need to go into the specifics of the drainage and the stormwater management system, and we recognize that. But in terms of the broad strokes of the plan, we feel confident that this is the way forward for our development team. And based on that, what we would propose is to request another continuance of the hearing for probably, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks for us to finally revise these plans, put them into final form, and catch up all of the renderings and additional context views that we previously presented to the board, to update those for the current design and layout. And we would propose then to come back to the board sometime in late November or early December with those plans to present them to the board and get further comments from the members and from the public and from the peer reviewers. And if in the meantime there are additional hearings that the board would like to conduct on other topics, such as the waivers that we have requested and other technical matters such as that, we could certainly entertain those and would be, of course, willing to attend those hearings and address those topics, as is the board's pleasure. But that's the general outline from our perspective, Chairman Hurley.
I appreciate that. So there's nobody really here tonight to sort of testify or present any evidence on behalf of the development team?
Our consultants are all here tonight, Chairman Hurley. So if you would like to hear from them, we can certainly have them come forward and address any topic you'd like to discuss tonight.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Corcoran with his.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Tim Czerwinski is going to report on the working session for the town. The peer review consultants are not here this evening.
Okay. Is Tim on?
Yes, he is.
Tim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was at the working session last week. Mr. Schomer reported back accurately, I would say. It was a productive and I think successful session. I did correspond to this afternoon with Sean and Cliff, and I think we all felt that without having actual new documents submitted to comment upon and for the public to review and for the board to review, that the best path forward was just to allow the development team to continue to work up the concepts and the ideas that were discussed at the working session. And Sean and Cliff will be back when we have documents in hand for them to formally comment upon. But I think they both agree coming out of the working session last week that the approach that the development team is taking is the right approach. And then they expect to see some good progress when they're eventually able to come up with some updated and revised drawings.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Tim. Mr. Corcoran, were you trying to be heard?
I am. Thank you. I'm stunned. I understood that you in particular wanted Scott Horsley to be involved on behalf of the consultant review, particularly because of the water and wetland issues. We were not made aware of the meeting. He was not invited to attend. This is the first I've heard that there was a consultant meeting that took place on Friday. So I don't even know where to start, but I think that particularly Mr. Horsley's involvement is important because of the water and wetland issues that he's raised, and I think the board was paying careful attention to at the earlier process of the meetings.
Is Scott here tonight then?
I don't know if he's here or not, because we didn't know what was going to happen tonight. I asked him and John Chesia if they could be available, but I don't know in particular whether they are. I hadn't seen anything new posted to the website. It wasn't clear that anything new was going to be recorded on tonight. I had some comments to offer relative to the volume of fill that's being brought in and the request for some peer review, for some more detailed accounting of the volumes of fill and the peer review associated with that, issues that we raised at the last meeting 2 weeks ago. But I don't know whether I suppose, if Mr. Horsley's here, he can speak for himself, but he was not invited, and I know that he didn't attend because he and I would have spoken about it.
Appreciate that. So, well, I mean, I'd be happy to have him come back at the next public hearing to give his thoughts. I mean, I'm only speaking for myself on this, not the other board members. We obviously haven't conferred really about any of this, but the issue of groundwater and groundwater saturation and just sort of water generally is a subject of concern to me. I still haven't really got my head all the way around it in terms of impacts, neighborhood impacts and the like, but just taking that site walk, I mean, made clear to me that water is a big factor and a big issue. So any further information that we could get on that, I would certainly welcome. So I'm happy to hear from Mr. Horsley when we next convene, and that's fine.
Yeah, he's not on.
Mr. Corcoran, I really don't have any role or input as to who goes to these meetings. I just assume that they're going to take place and that we'll get reports back and really don't involve myself nor do the other board members in who will be present and who will participate and what will be discussed. We're kind of leaving that to the professionals to deal with those issues.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. I just recall that Mr. Horsley was specifically invited to the last meeting at the urging of the chair because of the concerns that you had raised about water, stormwater management and the like. I think his participation is valuable. We're paying for that participation. The developer is not paying for that participation. And I'm stunned. I mean, to be shut out of a piece of the process that we felt we were invited to be involved in is pretty unbelievable. And I can hear jaws dropping from a dozen clients who are watching at this point.
Okay. Why don't we plan to hear from Mr. Horsley at the next session of the public hearing once we set that date?
That would be great.
Anyone else that you want to have make a presentation. That's fine with us. We want as much information as we can. Go ahead.
I think it would be helpful to have access to information in advance so that we have an opportunity to review it and comment on it.
I'm not sure I know what kind of information you're talking about.
Well, if there are new plans and they're showing new changes to how they're going to deal with stormwater, we certainly should have access to that to review it so that my clients can have an educated, my consultants can have an opportunity to have an educated review of that material and provide a reasonable report back to the board.
I'll ask Mr. Schomer, are there such documents, reports, studies, new material that will be made available to the board in the ordinary course that you could make available to Mr. Corcoran's people? And if I just don't know whether such things exist at the moment.
There's, to answer your
Well,
question,
I guess one of the
Chairman Hurley, there's no new reports or information or plans as of today's date. The reason why we suggested the continuance of a couple of weeks is to prepare those documents and to revise and update the reports. And as soon as we provide them in the public record to the board and to the town's consultants, Attorney Corcoran will have access to those. They're public records. His clients will have access to them, as will their consultants.
So it seems to me we need to set a date that would give Mr. Corcoran and his clients at least a week from the time that you file those reports with the town, so that they would have the ability to look at them and come back in an educated fashion and speak to us at the next hearing thereafter. So you think it would be at least 2 weeks before those materials were filed with the town?
I think 2 weeks at least is probably a conservative estimate with the holidays coming up. Just one thing to point out, we appreciate the feedback from Attorney Corcoran's consultants. We're reading what they're saying and all the memorandum that he and his clients are submitting. But I think it's important to keep in mind that their commentary in this process is public comment. So from our perspective, there's no special standing that he has, nor Mr. Horsley, nor Mr. Chesia. And from our perspective, we're really focused more on liaising with the town, with your department heads and with your peer review consultants who, as everyone is aware, have been retained at our expense for the purpose of advising the board specifically. They don't work for us. They're not part of our team. They're independent third-party consultants who have not been retained by someone who frankly is counsel here advocating in opposition to the project. So we'll be looking forward to hearing what Attorney Corcoran's consultants have to say at the appropriate time, but we don't feel it's appropriate to have him given any sort of further special standing than they've been given so far in this process, more than any other member of the general public.
I don't think any of us intended to give them any special standing, but they do have I think they should have an opportunity to be heard. And I'm sensitive to the fact that Mr. Corcoran's clients, I'm sure, have paid a fairly significant amount of money to get the value of those opinions. And so, I think we should hear them without giving any special consideration to them. So I think the way to proceed here is for you, Mr. Schomer, and your people to come up with whatever additional and revised and new information you want to file with the town. When that information is filed with the town, Mr. Corcoran, obviously, and his consultants will have an opportunity to review that. And with all that in mind, I'm trying to figure out what's a logical date for us to set for the next hearing.
Mr. Chair, I think that Tim also has his hand raised. I don't know if you want to take him now or in a minute.
Sure, that's fine. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually, I don't have as much to say as I did before Mr. Schomer got up, but I did want to just reiterate the point that, and again, one of the reasons why, when Sean and Cliff asked if they should be here tonight, I consulted with Judy and we kind of, hashed it out and decided that because there hadn't been any new submissions that had been made available to the board and to the general public, that, having the peer review consultants here at this meeting to kind of talk about things that they talked about that no one else had really seen yet, just wasn't appropriate. And I think that just underscores the point that, um, you know, we need to be seeing, documentation of these changes, and everyone, including the board and including the experts that have been retained by the board, as well as the general public, kind of need an opportunity, to look at these things. And so, that's why Sean and Cliff aren't here tonight, because we want to see, we want to see these changes on paper, and be able to kind of respond to them in a formal way. My recollection is that this working session on Friday was discussed and scheduled at the last hearing. I'm not sure that it was a secret or anything like that. And I just want to speak as the town planner. That the board didn't make a big deal about this, neither did the applicant. But at our last working session, which I think was very clearly understood as a kind of a technical conversation between subject matter experts, specifically meant to be offline outside of this hearing, so that folks could speak in a technical way and in a candid way about the issues. That a recording of that session was shared, publicly, which I don't think anyone who went into that hearing or that meeting, was expecting it to be shared publicly. So as a professional, that kind of I consider that to be really out of line. And so we made the board aware of that. It's your hearing, Mr. Chair, and I think the idea that the more subject matter experts, the better, is a valid concern. But I kind of don't know what to say, because I thought it was really an egregious turn of events. And so, it was quite frankly a little bit of a relief that it was, the town's experts and the development team's experts, in this meeting, and no one's really looking over their shoulders. So, if we're going to be scheduling new hearings, I think, Mr. Chair, it is absolutely your call as to who's there. And, you can make that judgment call, and you can invite whoever it is you want. Really what these meetings are about is providing, feedback and information, to the board. So, it is your call, and it's up to you to make it.
Mr. Chair, could I be heard on that issue?
Yes.
I released that video, and I spoke to Ms. Barr about it about a week later. I was unaware that there was an issue associated with it. I apologize to her for having done it. However, with 3 minutes left in the hearing and in the video, it was made clear that the video was going to be posted with the board and made available for review by the public. Based on that representation, I released that video to my clients. I did not do it with any understanding that it was not to be disseminated, and that what was said in that meeting was to have been remained confidential. So I apologize to the board for that. I have already apologized to Ms. Barrett, but I did so with a clear understanding that the video would be made public, be made available to the board, and available for review by the public. Perhaps I jumped the gun, perhaps not, but that's what happened. And that's the basis of what I did. But there were some significant issues raised in that hearing, not the least of which goes to the nature of the stormwater detention system that's been proposed. It'd be helpful to know whether in the conversation on Friday, the developer is planning a new system of stormwater detention, or whether they're not ready to say that now. Obviously, we'll wait to see what comes in the filings within the next few weeks. But that's a significant change. It's something that my clients, and particularly John Chesia and Scott Horsley, should have access to as soon as they can to evaluate it based on their expertise. Thank you.
Well, I think we've already heard, Mr. Clerk, and it's going to be filed. Whatever new reports there will be, whatever changes will be made, will be filed with the town, and they'll be made available to your clients and their consultants, and that's the way that will be. So, okay, I'm not going to get into the whole issue of releasing tapes. I mean, it seemed like it was an unfortunate incident, but I think we're past that now. We need to move on to discuss and consider the issues that relate to this project, and we will do that, and at some point deliberate about those issues. So for the time being, I think all we can do tonight, if everyone's in agreement, is to agree upon a date My suggestion, I guess, would be that it would be 3 weeks from today, which I guess would be November 23rd. Am I right with that? I don't think we run into Thanksgiving with that. And I'd ask Mr. Schomer and his clients to file whatever materials they're going to file as soon as they can, as much in advance of that November 23rd date as is possible, so that everyone can have access to that information and understand it and comment on it at that November 23rd hearing. Does that make sense to everyone?
Mr.
Yes,
Chair, can I just suggest that we put a date certain in sometime before the next 3 weeks expire for submission of those materials, particularly since Mr. Corcoran's experts haven't had a chance to review and will want a chance to review before the next hearing?
I think that's a good suggestion. Mr. Schomer, is there a date you think that we can establish for the filing of those materials?
I think there certainly is, Chairman Hurley. What I would suggest, however, is if we're going to have a date certain that is within that 3-week timeline, realistically speaking, I think we're probably looking at a little bit farther out. In speaking with my team today, the most, I would say, optimistic estimate for how quickly they could turn around fully revised materials, and that would not include context views and renderings, would be roughly 2 weeks. And I think that that's a very optimistic point of view. I think 3 weeks for completion of that is probably more realistic. And so if the board is looking to have those documents filed with, say, a week in advance for your review and public review by Attorney Corcoran, what I would suggest is the 23rd for filing of materials and then come back on the 30th of November after the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. Just, and I don't say that to request more time or to delay things. It's just more to be in keeping with realistic expectations from the consultants and completing the plans on time.
I have no trouble with the November 30th date. I just don't know that 1 week is enough for the public and Mr. Corcoran and consultants. I'm not sure that 1 week, particularly since Thanksgiving falls in the midst of that, is enough. Is it possible that you could have your materials filed within 2 weeks, Mr. Schomer?
I certainly will do my best to have that. I raise it just for the consideration of if we want a date certain, I don't want to disappoint the board and I don't want to disappoint the public, and by over promising something that we're not able to deliver on. So my preference in that case would be to extend things out a little bit farther. And if the public needs additional time, then perhaps the solution to that would be, rather than meeting on the 30th, meet on the following Tuesday.
That's the last date for us, though, isn't it?
Thank you.
December 7th.
We're aware of that. Under the circumstances, I think we would be willing to extend out that 180 days for an appropriate period of time.
Well, what do you guys think, Mike and Ted? What's your thoughts on this?
I mean, I'm pretty shocked at this whole thing. I mean, the board instructed you, Jesse, to include Mr. Horsley in this meeting. And no, the meeting was not a secret, as Mr. Chewinski pointed out. But the date and time and location of the meeting were a secret, and they were not shared with Mr. Horsley. And as a result, yes, Mr. Horsley's role here and Mr. Corcoran's role is that of public comment, but those are public comments that the board specifically asked to hear. And we asked to hear that Mr. Horsley be included in those conversations. Now here we are, because he wasn't included, we're now delayed 2-3 weeks, and we're running up against the deadline. So I don't have a specific request, but I think it's pretty, I don't know what the word is, pretty surprising that we're here and this is all kind of a device of your own making.
With respect, Mr. Brown, I would disagree with what you just said almost entirely. There's no connection from our perspective between whether Mr. Horsley and Mr. Chesia were invited to the second peer review working group session and the timeline needed for us to turn around the documents that we have to prepare. in order
How
to
not?
complete our submission to the board. The
How are
two,
they not
in
related?
my mind, are completely unrelated. As I said before, we appreciate their commentary. To be perfectly frank with you, Mr. Brown, we would not have been willing to entertain a second working group session had they been present. And the reason why I say that is because what they have done from the contents of the first working group session, and we're seeing it and hearing it still tonight, is not to use what was discussed during that meeting to reach a consensus on how to solve the problems that they have raised with respect to this project that we're proposing, but rather to make fodder for additional letters and filings and to effectively find issues upon which to oppose this project. So for that reason, we would not have been willing to entertain another working group session with them. With all due respect to their consultants, we respect their opinions. We felt that it was not as productive with them present, and we didn't think it would have been productive to have further working sessions. Moreover, I would say at the last hearing of the board, it was suggested that we have a working group session with the peer reviewers. There was no mention of Attorney Cochran's consultants being present. I didn't raise it, he didn't raise it, the board didn't raise it, and so we went forward with the peer review consultants alone. It was not intended to be to keep them out of the discussion or lack of transparency, but it was a matter of productivity to have a useful meeting, frankly.
It sounds like it was a specific intention to exclude them, but I'll leave that alone. Thank you, Mr. Schomer.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. My preference would be to set the hearing date for November 30th and ask that the applicant do all that is reasonably possible in terms of filing the materials as soon as possible with the town. And Mr. Corcoran, if we get to the hearing on November 30th and you haven't had enough time or your people haven't had enough time to digest and respond to whatever that material might be, then we'll take that up on the 30th and perhaps schedule another public hearing. And if need be, as Mr. Schomer has indicated, we could extend that 180 period so that we get a full hearing on all issues. So, but my preference would be to set a hearing date of November 30th with the hope that whatever materials are going to be filed with the town are filed as quickly as possible, and certainly in no event later than November 23rd. And we can go forward on that basis. If that's Mr. Dave or Mr. Brown, if that works for you, that would be my recommendation going forward.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah. Is there an outside date, or is it just as soon as possible? For producing the material.
I think the outside date was November 23rd, but with the hope that it would be much sooner than that.
Okay. And where are we, or maybe we can confirm where we are on the testing that had been discussed, the mounting analysis, and the permeability testing, and are those going to be done, or are they? There was some discussion about waiting for the design to be done, but the contrary opinion was that they should be done sooner.
You're talking about the groundwater mounting analysis.
Yeah, right.
I can speak further to that, Mr. Daber. We're still in the process of finalizing the consultant who's going to be doing that work. We're getting bids. We hope to have the final selection made by the end of this week to start that work towards the end of the month and perhaps into December with what we would intend to be submission of the results of those materials just prior to the close of the testimony.
Mr. David, that's a great question, because I think that study to me is critical. Because just doing the site walk, the most recent site walk, it's self-evident that surface water and water generally is a huge problem at this site. And so I think we really need the benefit of that groundwater analysis so that we can best understand the impacts that this project is going to have on the existing water conditions. So I think that's a critical piece of information for us to get, and the sooner we can get it, the better. So,
Understood.
okay. So for the time being, I guess we'll leave it that we will meet. The next session of the public hearing will be at 7 o'clock on November 30th.
Mr. Chair, I think Bev Sutton wants to say something here.
I'm sorry, who?
Me.
Oh, okay.
We have several attendees. I'm not sure if we're taking testimony this evening, but we have several abutters. so
Well,
to
I'm
speak.
not going to cut people off. I mean,
I
they've
know,
waited.
but I
They've
just-
waited to
yep.
be here, and so if people have something to say, let's hear it.
Thank you. Laura? Laura Roche?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Lara Roach, 44 Holmes Lane. I want to take a second to echo what Attorney Corcoran said when he spoke a little bit ago. He said that he was stunned. I am also stunned. My husband's sitting here with me stunned. I have neighbors, abutters, direct abutters that are texting. We're all stunned. It's quite shocking and alarming to hear Attorney Schomer say that we are at the 2-yard line. And I quote, he said, we're at the 2-yard line. We listened back to the hearing. I listened to it again this past week from 2 weeks ago. There were a number of outstanding issues. None of them had any answers, actually. So to hear we're at the 2-yard line without any answers is incredibly frightening, actually, as a direct abutter. Very, very scary. I think one point that I'd like to make is that we've all agreed that water is a major issue for this site. Everyone agrees. It comes up time and time again. However, the town does not have a peer reviewer speaking to water. That is Scott Horsley as part of the abutters. The abutters are paying for Scott Horsley to make comments about the water. That's the only expert that is speaking.
And you don't want him there.
And you don't want him there because you don't want to hear it. It's a bad problem, and we'd like him there because it should be addressed. And I don't understand why the applicant or the town wouldn't want to hear from a hydrologist.
They want to see that they want
The second point that I'd like to make is the fact that I believe, Chair Hurley, you had requested to have the fire chief at a hearing because you had mentioned that you have heard kind of from others what what his opinion has been. Where is Chief Madden? Is he going to join us? What are his comments? There's just so many issues, but those are two main issues. And, quite frankly, again, very surprised to hear we're at the 2-yard line. Very alarmed and surprised.
Well, the board members don't know what yard line we're at. So that's Mr. Schomer's projection. With respect to the fire chief, we've had some difficulty in finding an evening or a night when he would be available to come and testify before the board. But I have shared your interest in understanding what his opinion is. I can tell you that I received a copy of an email that I believe he sent to Tim or someone in the town. In effect, what he said was that without that secondary access, that this does not comply with fire codes, and so the secondary access would be absolutely necessary to this project. But implicit in that was the notion that if you had that secondary access, that it probably would comply. But having said that, my hope would be that Tim could arrange for the fire chief to join us on November 30th, if at all possible, to address those issues and concerns in person.
Tim is actually, his hand is up, perhaps he can answer this.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would have to go back in my emails with Chief Madden to look, but he is very much interested in coming to testify before this board on this project. There is a fire station building committee meeting tonight that conflicted with this hearing, so he wasn't able to make it.
Right.
But we are committed to finding a date where he'll be able to come. And if November 30th is the next hearing, we'll do our level best to get him in front of you all.
That'd be great, Tim. Thank you. All right, Beverly, anyone else?
Yes, there is. Riley?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is,
Yes.
excuse me, I apologize. This is Elizabeth Janiga from 658 Canton Avenue. I have a comment for the chairman and then Mr. Schomer. Mr. Chair, I feel, and I believe my neighbors do as well, if I had to guess, that the applicant is really stretching this out. I believe at the last meeting you said there was going to be an end to the public appearance or public comments for this particular project. And I think they really have been stretching this out so that they don't have to hear from us. In addition, I believe it was at the last meeting or the meeting prior to that, I apologize for my memory, but you had requested from their, I believe, engineer for a few plans in terms of how one of them was, how are they going to actually go forth with the project, forgive my terminology, management, or how they're actually going to do it. And their response was that it was atypical to ask for that now. Same thing with I believe the geotechnical, you had asked for that as well. And they said, well, it's quote, atypical for ask for that now. Nevertheless, you asked for that. And I don't think that they have provided those two things at this meeting. Maybe they did last week and I'm unaware, but that's not been provided. So that concerns me. And I think what my neighbors and Mr. Corcoran have emphasized that they're not providing what's been asked of them. Mr. Schomer, to your point, you're correct. My opinion, that of all of my neighbors, they're public opinions, public statements, and anyone that we hire is considered public. But my question to you, Sean Reardon, who I guess is not considered, quote, public opinion, you are paying for, but it is the town's representative, has commented about the water. And he's not a hydrologist, and I concur with my neighbor, Lara Roach, that the town should have a water expert. Nevertheless, with regard to Sean, Mr. Reardon, he has expressed serious concerns. And in fact, if you really listen to what he said, this impervious pavement is unacceptable. And that was stated, I believe, at least 2 or 3 meetings previously. And the question is, has that been changed? So apparently you want to rely on those peer reviewers, not our peer reviewers who are, quote, public opinion. So I think, again, Mr. Schomer and the chair, this has not been addressed. And this is being dragged out.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. I'm not sure I understand the dragged out part of it. It's taking as long as it needs to in order to get all the information that we all want and desire, I think. So I don't see what the advantage would be to the applicant to dragging this out, but
I apologize. I think I mean that you had said that, I guess the public comments were ending in December, and they're saying that they need another 2-3 weeks to again get their plans together, and if necessary, quote, then they'll extend it further for the public. Well, is that some kind of guarantee? That's what I mean by dragging this out, that they're not meeting. You're asking for things they're not provided, and then they keep asking for extensions. That's what I meant by that. And yes, I do hope that all the timelines will be followed and all of us will be heard.
yeah, I mean, the extensions, I think, are frankly to the towns and the neighborhoods benefit, that they continue to provide the information that we need. And there's no particular reason for us to rush this as a board. Usually it's the applicant that's rushing the board because we have timelines that have some real legal implications if we don't meet them. So, and that has been my concern. I wanted to take as long as is necessary for us to get all the information that we can and make the most intelligent decision that we can. And if the applicants want to keep extending those timelines to allow us to have that opportunity, then I think that's a good thing for the town. And we will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. That's very reassuring. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Bev?
Yes. 6. Stan. Stan?
Stan, okay, you're muted.
Well, I've asked him to unmute. And, okay, perhaps he's busy. Let's go into Cheryl Tagayas.
Okay.
Good evening, Cheryl Tagayas, 660 Canton Avenue.
Good
I
evening.
would just say that I agree with my neighbors, Laura and Beth, about their comments about the process. We really have only had one evening of substantive discussion of this project, and we're getting close to up against the deadline. And I do think that there's a real question of how you can cover all of the things that have been raised as issues and even raised by the peer reviewers, if not the neighbor experts. And even myself, I've raised a number of issues. I realize the applicant legally doesn't have to reply to all of our comments, but if they're really truly interested in being good neighbors and building a development here, that they would be interested in what the neighbors have to think and try and respond to the comments. And so you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that perhaps there could, or Mr. Schomer, I think actually mentioned it, perhaps there could be some meetings in the interim before the plans are ready to talk about some other issues. I think the construction management plan could be one of those very topics. There were a lot of good questions raised about the amount of fill, how you can actually bring that in without causing harm to neighbors and to wetlands, even to the safety of Canton Avenue. Another would be waivers. Since we're running short on time, I do think it would be beneficial to try and cover as much ground with as many meetings as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Just very quickly, Kristen Reppa from 654 Canton Avenue. I just wanted to thank you, Chair Hurley, as well as Mr. Brown and Mr. Daber. I apologize if I've mispronounced your name, for speaking up this evening. Forgive me for saying that I feel as though there are times where I observe you're listening and kind of just not necessarily responding. And this evening I saw some disgust as well as some very keen interest in what was happening. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for, again, as a neighbor, I don't necessarily feel like there's anybody on our side except for the people that we're paying. And I know that that's not right. Obviously, you're the town, officials, and I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you. Bev, anyone left?
Yes, we have Stan back.
Okay.
Stan, you need to unmute, please. Okay, we're back. We're on to Mike Kelly.
Okay.
Mike, please unmute.
Can you hear me? Mike
You're
Kelly,
on now.
Mike Kelly, 132 Whittier Road. I'm a little bit confused, and my confusion just came about us in this meeting. The water seems to be a major issue, and I heard Mr. Schomer say that they haven't contracted out permeability tests yet. And it's my understanding, and I think I'm correct, that a variable in the structural, the stormwater design would be the permeability of the area. So without that information, I don't know how you could complete a stormwater design. And if they're going to come back in 2 weeks with information that has a complete stormwater design and they don't have a contractor yet to do permeability testing, I don't see how they can manage that. Maybe somebody could respond to that. I mean, that's one of the factors in the stormwater design, the permeability of the existing area. Unless their stormwater design is going to be completely unreliant on that, and the stormwater design is going to contain all the stormwater, and it's not going to, enable any permeability. which sounds kind of absurd, but.
One way or the other, Mr. Kelly, they're going to have to convince the board that they have done all that is necessary to deal with the water issues. And if we have to extend the time to do that, to accomplish that, then we will. And on the other hand, if we're not satisfied with the water issues at the end of the day, and the applicant is not willing to continue to extend until we have all the information that we need to make an intelligent decision, well, they run the risk that we vote the project down. So we're going to deal with water, and we're going to get the information that we need to make an intelligent decision. And it may take longer than we had originally anticipated, but I don't think the timing of this really matters. It only becomes an issue if we run up against a deadline where there's a constructive approval, and we won't let that happen. So we'll get the information, and it may be slow in coming, but I don't think we're going to ever reach a decision in this, certainly not a favorable decision, until we have the mounding analysis and we understand what's going to happen with the water as it comes off this project, and where it goes, into the ground, not into the ground. That's a critical issue to me, having been to that site a couple of times, and it's one that we'll want information on, and we'll continue the hearing until we get what we need.
I just like to lastly comment, I'm not concerned with the time. I'm just confused at how you could do structural stormwater design without permeability data.
That's a good point. It's an excellent point that you've made, and presumably they'll deal with that.
Chairman Hurley, if I may, through you, would you mind if I just add a point of clarification? It's a specific point, but I think it's one we can clear up.
Okay.
Through you, Chairman Hurley, to respond to what Mr. Kelly is saying with respect to permeability. There have been permeability and soil tests. Those are included as part of the stormwater management report that we filed with the board, and they're also included on the site plans that show the test pit data. What we're talking about, Mr. Kelly, is a specific additional type of test known as groundwater mounding, and I won't get into the details because engineering is only an amateur weekend hobby of mine, and I'm not competent to talk about it in any level of detail. But that is an additional test that was requested that we do. It was requested by the peer reviewer and by Mr. Horsley, and we've agreed to do it, and it will be done before the hearing is completed.
And I would think that information, again, would need to be inputted into the stormwater design. Any information relative to permeability would be part of the stormwater design.
Through you, Chairman Hurley, there is permeability data that is incorporated and is the basis of the stormwater management design. This is an additional test that was requested that we perform, and we are willing to do it.
All right, and again, Mr. Schumer, I assume that if the results of it were not positive, for lack of a better term, that you may have to go back to the drawing board with your stormwater design. My understanding is that this testing that we're talking about, this groundwater mounding, what it's designed to do is to see if the site has the hydraulic capacity to take on the surface water that is in excess of what would be the natural infiltration to the soil. And so that's if I've got that right, I think I'm in the right world when I say that. That's important to us, because if the ground doesn't have hydraulic capacity to handle the water, then we're going to have a water problem. And so there'll have to be some change made to accommodate that. So it's a critical bit of information that we have to have, and I understand that we'll get it.
That's right, Mr. Hurley. And I think the bottom line, from my perspective, is that whether this is a 40B project or not, compliance with the state stormwater management standards is required no matter what, and we're not asking for those to be waived. So if the results of the groundwater mounding analysis show that we can't comply with the state stormwater management standards, then it's true that the project would need to be revised. So stay tuned for, we recognize everyone is interested in these results. It's a critical issue, and we recognize that.
Great, thank you. Bev?
Yes, of course. We have Sean Fahey.
Thank
you, Mr. Chair. Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had raised my hand a little while ago, and I am probably at this point going to reiterate what some of the speakers have said prior to me speaking. Mike Kelly, notably, this issue of stormwater management, and I've been attending the meetings now for months. This issue, Mr. Chair, has been spoken of over and over and over and over again. And as Mr. Schomer had noted, if this site does not have or cannot have a design that will meet stormwater management practices, we're all wasting enormous amounts of time and money. And yet, we're in November, and the applicant has still yet to do what could have been done months ago with respect to this topic. I remember from the last meeting, you were very firm on two topics. One of them was you had stated very clearly to the applicant that you wanted this information, whether it's the mounding analysis or whether it's permeability, but sufficient geotechnical data to support that this design works, prove the design works. The second item that you had asked the applicant to provide, and the engineer from Allen and Major spoke about this particular topic with you, and in exchange was the construction management plan. And after some discussion with you, he acquiesced and said, yes, he could prepare a construction management plan. Although the project had not yet been fully designed, he could prepare something for you. So I'm just becoming a little unclear as to what the applicant is actually required, to submit what you've asked them for. My recollection is from the last hearing that you were pretty firm on both of those topics.
Well, I think we've talked about the groundwater mounding analysis and permeability. I think we've talked about that tonight, and that's something we definitely have to have. The construction management plan, I do recall that discussion. I'm not sure whether they committed to giving us, I know they said they could do it. I'll ask Mr. Schomer whether they are in the process of doing it and whether we can expect to receive that as well.
I can answer that, Chairman Hurley. We have been in touch with our traffic consultant and asked him to issue a memorandum to the board, which would be included with our next submission, addressing the issue of the construction traffic that was raised at the last hearing.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chair,
if that answers the questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, am I still able to speak?
Yes, you are able to speak.
It is more than just traffic. A construction management plan is a fairly comprehensive plan as to how the project will be approached in terms of sequence of work, logistics. Traffic, as Mr. Schomer said, is part of it, but it's only one part of it. So it's for the neighbors and the people that will live with this project while it's being built. It's an important analysis that should be provided to the public so that they can be assured of a methodology that will allow them to have a level of confidence of what impacts the project would have. It's not just traffic.
And I do recall the consultants are saying that although it was difficult and perhaps a little bit early in the process, but that it could be done. I do recall that was said, and my hope has been that we would get that construction management plan that you've just described.
If I may, Chairman Hurley, just to speak further on that, a construction management plan of the nature that Mr. Fahey is talking about is it's somewhat challenging to do at this stage in the process because the contractor hasn't been selected, the construction company hasn't been selected. We don't have final approval for these buildings. We don't have building permits. We don't have the other permits that we need for this. So we have agreed to look into, and what we did on the 582 Blue Hill Avenue project was to submit a draft preliminary construction management plan. But I think it's important for everyone to bear in mind that anything that we file at this stage will be very preliminary in nature. It will be very much a draft and subject to change based on who we actually select as the company to build this project. And that decision obviously won't be made until much later in this process.
Well, I guess all I can say to you is that you should give us whatever you can give us now in as much detail as you can give us, and we'll evaluate it when we receive it.
Understood.
Okay. Do you have anyone left?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to try for Stan again. Stan. Okay. Barbara.
Who's mine?
Hi, my name is Stan Janiga. I'm using Barbara, my wife's laptop here, and that's why Barbara showed up. I am not an abutter. I've been a resident of Milton for the last 24 years. Can you hear me now, well, Beverly?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I have a significant background in engineering, construction, and operations, including hundreds of facilities across the country, and ultimately, even in 1995, managing $4 billion worth of engineering and construction across the country. I worked many years in the industry. I have over 40 years as a licensed professional engineer, having looked at, again, hundreds, if not thousands of projects. Things that really bother me about this, and I'm doing it as an interested citizen. I've served as a member of the Warrant Committee, and some of you may remember I did the DPW study back a few years ago, or managed that as the chair. The two things that concern me greatly is I have never seen a fill of 7 feet in all those years. I have never seen anything close to that. In fact, the most I've ever seen is modest, just kind of evening out the terrain. So that troubles me a great deal. And the engineering behind that, in my judgment, needs very close and careful examination. The second thing I would say is I've heard talk here about needing additional water information, permeability and so forth, additional geotechnical information. That doesn't sync with developer counsel's comment that we're near final design. That geotechnical information can have a significant effect on foundations, for example, which is why that work is done. So the notion that we're at final design, but we haven't even done that work is, in my mind, specious as hell. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I appreciate it. If you want me to answer a question, I'll do my best to try.
No, thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think Barbara is still waiting. Barbara?
Okay.
Where's Barbara?
No, we're going to shut off from there.
Oh, that's Stan. Right. Sorry, Stan. Okay. Kristen. Kristen?
I apologize. I didn't realize that my hand was still raised. I didn't really have anything else to say, though. If I'm on speaker, my only detail I would like to say is, Chairman Hurley, if you don't mind me asking or requesting that you do choose an actual date. I was unmuted prior to my finishing the last time. Regardless, that's my only last comment is, if Chair Hurley, if you could choose a date for the applicant to submit to allow our reviewers to see the work prior to a 30th date. I don't believe that holiday week is considered an actual week. If we look at business days, there's only one business day left in that week if it's submitted on Tuesday, the 23rd. Right. Wednesday is a business day, and then the rest of it is all gone to the holidays. So if you don't mind me saying, it would be nice if you could choose a date prior to the 23rd for them to submit. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think the way I had left it with Mr. Sherman is that they would get it to us as early as possible, but by no later than that particular date, the 23rd.
Yes,
I don't know whether I just don't know whether it's feasible for them to
choose another
get it.
day. Choose the Friday.
Well, let me ask if that's feasible.
I don't know
the
answer
point
to
is
that,
well
Chairman
taken.
Hurley.
The point is well taken that the more time that we have with that information and the public has with that information, the better. The 23rd is a tough day. I mean, it's a bad week. People are busy, people are traveling, people have the holiday. It doesn't give us much time before the 30th. So even if we could get it the Friday before.
I don't know why I didn't come up and ask you when we did it on. I don't know.
Didn't know. Just said do.
Oh boy, do I still have Stan on?
I don't know.
No, I don't.
So Mr. Sherman, I don't know, is it possible to at least get it to us on the Friday?
We will absolutely do our best to do that, Chairman Hurley. And it's understood, the board and the members of the public want these documents as soon as possible. We will get them in as soon as possible. I don't want to promise that Friday or even that Tuesday before. I think 3 weeks from tonight is definitely doable, but before that, I just don't want to make promises that we'll come back and have to have our hat in hand and say, sorry. I'm more focused on realistic deadlines.
But you understand that the later we get it, the greater likelihood that we're going to have to continue the hearing after the 30th, so that people and their consultants and everyone else will have an opportunity to digest and comment on that information.
Understood, Chairman Hurley. And just to make the further point, it's critical that the board members and the town department heads and the peer reviewers have an opportunity to review things as well. So we understand it's important to get it in as soon as possible, and we will do it.
Okay. Beverly, are we done?
We have one more, Leonardo. Let me see, Leonardo.
Okay, so this is going to be the last one of the evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I live at 654 Canton Ave, and a lot of what I wanted to say has been said. My only comment is, as a business owner, I find it highly irresponsible of the applicant to not understand where they want to have their project. I think, I don't remember who said it, but you know, we've been looking for this information for months, and, you know, to not provide it is irresponsible. But I think from a business point of view, from, you know, from where the Tamposies are, I think it's highly responsible for them to understand what they're entering into. I just can't understand how that's a smart business decision. So like everybody said, we're anticipating this information to understand, you know, how this is going to impact our neighborhood. And, you know, it'd be nice to have it sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so I think that closes the hearing for this evening.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, can I ask a couple of questions?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Ted.
Okay, that's okay. So is the construction management plan, I think it was indicated that some kind of a preliminary plan, even though it was subject to possible change when a contractor had been engaged, would be doable. I mean, is that going to have a similar date for production on the 23rd?
Yes, it would,
whenever?
Mr. Daver. Yes, it would.
It would. Okay, so that would be at the same, and it's the same time frame. Okay, thanks.
Our intent, just to clarify, sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, no, go ahead.
Our intent is for this filing to be really the comprehensive filing for this project, and hopefully no further changes will be anticipated from us.
Okay. Can I ask a couple of basic questions? Is there any change in the number of units in what you're going to be proposing?
No, there's not. The broad strokes are the same as what we presented to the board. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It's for the most part, it's site layout revisions, revisions to the stormwater management and drainage system, and revisions to some of the grading primarily.
Okay, and so no change either in the coverage of, the square footage that's covered by buildings or?
I
or
could,
do you not know that yet?
I could ask our architect to come on, and excuse me for speaking over you again, Mr. Daber. There is a slight reduction in the amount of impervious coverage, is my recollection on this new revised plan, but it's not significantly different.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, is it Timler Andrew, the Mark? Yes, there was, because we consolidated a couple of the buildings per Cliff Bomer's suggestions in his peer review report, particularly at where the new building 6 is labeled, where we kind of created the circulation loop by connecting those two dead end parking ends. There was some reduction in the building footprint coverage because we have a larger building there now. As opposed to there's kind of an efficiency in having those two buildings connected. In terms of overall unit count, we're at the same though. And there was a slight modification in the building, the unit mix as well. But we're currently where we were with what was presented to the board 2 weeks ago.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions right now.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, then, so we have agreed that we're going to continue the public hearing until November 30th. Mr. Sherman is going to present the additional information that we've discussed as soon as possible, but in any event, not later than November 23rd. To the extent that obviously we're going to need additional time after the 30th to fully understand that information, we will continue the hearings as necessary. So that's where we stand for this evening. Thank you all for participating. Great public commentary tonight. We will certainly take all of that into account as we go forward and eventually deliberate with respect to this plan. So I thank you, and we'll see you on November 30th. And in the interim, have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
Good night.